I'm Tanya Miller, 32, a financial analyst in Nashville, Tennessee. Last month, I was scrolling through my bank app expecting the usual when my heart stopped. $50,000 gone from the joint account I'd set up to help my family. The transactions led straight to my brother's failing tech startup, a black hole of bad ideas he'd been peddling for years. I dug deeper, and there it was: transfers approved without my consent tied to my parents' logins. They were funneling my money to him behind my back like I was just a cash machine for their golden boy. My stomach churned, not just from the betrayal but from the audacity. They thought I'd never notice. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the numbers, my mind racing. This wasn't a mistake. It was a plan. My parents, who'd always put my brother first, were at it again. But this time, I wasn't the quiet kid who'd let it slide. I started piecing it together: bank records, emails, anything to nail them. I wasn't going to confront them in some tearful family meeting. No, I'd do it my way: a dinner at a packed Nashville restaurant where I'd lay out every shred of evidence and watch their faces crumble. They had no idea what was coming. If you've ever been blindsided by family, drop a comment below. How did you handle it? Subscribe to catch how this unfolds. Growing up in Nashville wasn't exactly warm and fuzzy, and my childhood was basically a lesson in how to become invisible. My parents, Stephen Miller and Patricia Miller, only had eyes for my brother, Finn Miller. When I was 12, they bought Finn a shiny new bike for his birthday, while I got a hand-me-down sweater that smelled like mothballs. By 16, they were paying Finn's private school tuition while I worked weekends at a diner to save for college. Finn was their golden child. He could do no wrong, even when he flunked out of community college or crashed the car they'd given him. I learned early that love in our house came with a price tag, and I wasn't worth the cost. But that didn't break me. At 17, I got a job at Best Buy, ringing up TVs and dodging creepy customers to scrape together enough for Vanderbilt. I majored in finance, fought through late-night study sessions, and landed a job as a financial analyst at a solid firm in Nashville. By 30, I was earning six figures, advising clients on million-dollar portfolios. My parents, who ran a small real estate business, started leaning on me for family support. I was naive enough to think they'd changed, so I opened a joint account to help them through a rough patch. They would deposit rent checks from their properties. I'd cover the shortfalls. Meanwhile, Finn was pouring money into his latest big idea, a tech startup that promised to revolutionize music streaming, but delivered nothing but slick pitch decks and excuses. At first, I suspected nothing. Finn had always been a dreamer, hatching schemes since he was a kid, like selling lemonade for $20 a cup. My parents ate it up, calling him visionary. But when I checked the joint account after that initial shock, $50,000 missing, I noticed something else. A string of smaller withdrawals, 500 here, 1,000 there, linked to Finn's personal Venmo, not his startup's business account. One was for a weekend in Vegas. Another went to a high-end guitar shop. My jaw tightened as I scrolled through the transactions. This wasn't about saving the company. Finn was treating the family's money like his personal piggy bank, and my parents were enabling it. I sat at my desk, the laptop glow stinging my eyes. My mind went back to high school when Finn borrowed my savings for a new phone and never paid me back. My parents had laughed it off, saying, "He's your brother, Tanya." Now they were enabling him again, this time with my money. I thought about the joint account opened with the hard-earned cash I'd put in to keep their business afloat. Stephen and Patricia had access, sure, but those withdrawals clearly pointed to Finn. I pulled up more statements and cross-checked dates. A pattern emerged: whenever Finn's startup needed a lifeline, money disappeared from the account, often with my parents' approval codes. They weren't just negligent, they were complicit. My fingers hovered over my phone. I wanted to call them and demand answers, but I held back. Shouting wouldn't solve anything. I needed proof, something undeniable, to show them who Finn really was. I remembered being 18, begging for gas money to get to work while Finn had a new laptop for school. The resentment rose, sharp and familiar. I was no longer the kid who swallowed her anger. I started downloading bank statements flagging every suspicious transfer. Finn's startup was a black hole and my parents were pouring my money into it. But this time I would not let them use me again. I was going to make them face the truth. The next morning I called Leslie. My best friend Leslie Parker was a CPA who could spot a bad number faster than I could down a coffee. I paced my apartment phone pressed to my ear explaining the joint account mess. $50,000 gone siphoned to my brother's failing startup with my parents' approval codes blinking like neon signs. Leslie didn't hesitate. "Meet me at my office," she said, her voice sharp. "Bring every bank statement you've got." At her downtown Nashville firm, Leslie hunched over her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She pulled up the joint account records, cross-referencing them with Finn's transactions. Within an hour, she leaned back, her face grim. "Tanya, he forged your signature," she said, pointing to a scanned withdrawal form. The loops and swirls of my name were close, but the slant was off. Finn's clumsy attempt to mimic me. $50,000 had been wired to his personal Venmo, not his startup's account. Smaller transfers followed: 1,000 for a Nashville bar tab, $2,000 for a custom leather jacket. My blood boiled. This wasn't just theft. It was personal. Leslie printed out the evidence: bank forms, transfer logs, even a screenshot of Finn's Venmo flaunting a new watch. "This is enough to bury him," she said, stacking the papers. I nodded, my mind already racing to the next step. I needed more than numbers. I opened my laptop and dug into Finn's emails, which I'd accessed through a shared family account years ago. There it was, a message to an investor, Finn bragging about new funding for his startup, sent the day after the big withdrawal. The arrogance made my skin crawl. He thought he'd gotten away clean. I drove to Green Hills to meet my Aunt Rose Brooks, a retired lawyer who'd spent 30 years dismantling shady deals. Over coffee at a quiet cafe, I laid out the evidence. Aunt Rose adjusted her glasses, scanning the forged signature and Finn's email. "This is textbook fraud," she said, her voice steady but fierce. "You can sue him civilly for damages and lock down that account before they touch another cent." She outlined my options: freeze the account, file a lawsuit, and maybe even press charges. I wasn't ready for criminal court, but a civil suit felt right. Finn needed to face consequences, and my parents needed to see their golden boy for who he was. Aunt Rose leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Don't confront them yet," she warned. "Set it up so they can't wiggle out. A public setting, lots of witnesses." I thought of the joint account my money poured into it to help Dad and Mom's real estate deals, only for Finn to treat it like his personal ATM. The betrayal stung deeper than I expected. I took Rose's advice and started planning. A dinner at the Southern A packed Nashville restaurant would be perfect. I'd invite my parents, Finn, Leslie, and a few family friends who'd always bought Finn's visionary act. I sent the invites that afternoon, keeping my tone neutral. Family dinner my treat. Let's catch up. Dad texted back a thumbs up. Mom sent a heart emoji. Finn didn't reply, but I knew he'd show he never missed a free meal. Leslie agreed to bring the evidence ready to back me up. I called the Southern and reserved a private room, ensuring enough space for the drama I was about to unleash. My hands shook as I hung up, not from fear but from anticipation. Finn had played his hand, thinking I'd stay quiet like always, but I had the receipts, and I was done being the invisible sister. The evening of the dinner arrived and the restaurant buzzed with energy. The Southern Nashville's go-to spot for upscale comfort food was packed with locals and tourists clinking glasses and digging into steaks. I sat at the head of a long table in the private room, my hands steady but my pulse racing. Leslie, my best friend, sat to my right, a folder of evidence tucked under her chair. Across from me were Dad and Mom chatting with old family friends, Mark and Ellen, who'd known us since I was a kid. Finn slouched at the far end, scrolling his phone, oblivious to the storm coming his way. The server poured wine, and I let the small talk hum for a while. Dad rambled about a new real estate deal. Mom fussed over Finn's untouched salad. I took a sip of water, Then stood my voice cutting through the chatter. "I have something to share," I said loud enough to make heads turn. I slid the folder from Leslie and opened it, pulling out the first piece of evidence, a bank statement showing the $50,000 withdrawal. "This is from our joint account," I said, passing it to Mark. "Money I put in to help our family gone in one transfer to Finn's personal account." The room went quiet, Forks pausing midair. I held up the forged withdrawal form, my signature mangled by Finn's hand. "He signed my name to take it," I said, my eyes locked on my brother. Finn's face paled, his phone clattering onto the table. I passed around an email printout, Finn bragging to an investor about new funding the day after the withdrawal. "This isn't about his startup," I said, my voice steady. "He spent it on a Vegas trip, a leather jacket, a custom guitar." Dad coughed, his face reddening. "Tanya, you're blowing this out of proportion," he said, glancing at the guests. "Finn needed that money to save his company. It's a tough market out there." Mom nodded, her hands twisting her napkin. "He's trying so hard, sweetheart. You know how much his dreams mean to him." I clenched my jaw, expecting this. They'd been making excuses for Finn since he was 10, when he accidentally broke my laptop, and they bought him a new one instead. I slid another document across the table, Leslie's analysis of Finn's Venmo transactions. "This shows where the money really went," I said. $500 for bar tabs, $2,000 for that jacket, not a dime to his startup." Leslie leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "I double-checked the records, Tanya. It's all personal spending, not business." The guests shifted in their seats, whispers rippling. Ellen, who'd always called Finn charming, stared at the papers, her brow furrowed. Mark shook his head, muttering something about trust. Finn finally spoke, his voice sharp. "You're twisting this, Tanya." "I was going to pay it back?" He leaned forward, pointing at me. "You're just jealous because I'm taking risks while you play it safe." I laughed, the sound cold. "Risks. Like blowing my money on a watch." I turned to the guests. "I trusted my family with that account. They betrayed me, and Finn forged my name to do it." Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. "Tanya, how could you say that? We're your parents." The tension was thick, the air heavy with disbelief. Ellen pushed her plate away, her face tight with disappointment. "Stephen, Patricia, how could you let this happen?" she asked, her voice low. Mark crossed his arms, avoiding Dad's eyes. The other guests, neighbors, and old colleagues murmured their trust in my parents, crumbling. Finn slumped back, his bravado gone, replaced by a sullen glare. I sat down, my heart pounding but my resolve firm. They'd played their parts for years, doting parents, visionary son, but tonight, the masks were off. Leslie stood up, her voice cutting through the restaurant's hum. My best friend held up a spreadsheet, her eyes locked on the table. "Finn didn't use the $50,000 for his startup," she said, her tone cold and precise. "He spent $10,000 on a used BMW at a Nashville dealership, $5,000 on a Miami weekend, and $3,000 on a private club membership." The guests gasped, their eyes darting to Finn, who froze his fork halfway to his mouth. Leslie passed the spreadsheet around, showing Venmo receipts and bank transfers. "Not 1 cent went to his business," she added, sitting down. I stood, my voice steady despite the fire in my chest. "Dad, Mom, Finn, you need to leave. Now." Mom's eyes widened, her napkin crumpling. "Tanya, you can't mean that." She stammered. "We're family." Dad gripped his glass, his knuckles white. "This is ridiculous. You're humiliating us." Finn shoved his chair back, his face twisted. "You're making this up to ruin me," he snapped. I didn't flinch. "The evidence speaks for itself," I said. "I'm closing the joint account tonight. We're done." The guests murmured, some nodding, others staring at my parents in disbelief. I stepped out to the restaurant's lobby and called Sharon Lee, a bank manager I'd worked with for years. "Sharon, it's Tanya," I said, my voice low. "I need the joint account frozen immediately." Sharon didn't hesitate. "I'll need your ID and a fraud report," she said. Can you come to the branch tomorrow? I agreed, explaining the forged signature and unauthorized transfers. Sharon pulled up the account on her system confirming the suspicious activity transfers to Finn's personal account approved with my parents' codes. This looks bad, she said. I'll flag it and start an internal review. Back in my apartment that night, I texted Aunt Rose. Dinner went as planned, I wrote. I'm ready to move forward. She called me within minutes, her voice calm but resolute. We'll file a civil suit against Finn, she said. The forged signature is our strongest card, clear evidence of fraud. We mapped out the next steps, drafting a complaint, gathering Leslie's financial analysis, and submitting the bank records and Finn's email. Aunt Rose knew a lawyer in Nashville who could handle the case, someone sharp enough to make Finn pay for every cent he stole. I felt a weight lift, replaced by a cold determination. This wasn't just about the money, it was about justice. The next morning, I met Sharon at the bank's downtown branch. She walked me through the fraud report, her pen moving quickly as she noted the forged signature and unauthorized withdrawals. We've locked the account, she said, handing me a confirmation. No one can touch it now. I exhaled the first real breath I'd taken in days. Sharon flagged additional transactions, smaller ones I hadn't noticed, like a $700 payment to a Nashville DJ for a party Finn threw. Each discovery fueled my resolve. I thanked Sharon and left clutching the paperwork that would bury my brother in court. Later that day, I met Aunt Rose at her house, a quiet spot outside Nashville. She spread out the evidence on her dining table: bank statements, Leslie's spreadsheet, the forged form, Finn's email. We're building a tight case, she said, her eyes scanning the documents. Finn will have to repay the $50,000 plus damages for the forgery. I nodded, my mind replaying the dinner, Mom's excuses, Dad's anger, Finn's pathetic denial. They'd spent years treating me like an afterthought, but I wasn't invisible anymore. I was taking control, one step at a time. The week after the dinner was quieter than I expected. The Nashville courthouse where Aunt Rose's lawyer friend filed the civil suit against Finn moved faster than I'd hoped. By Friday, the judge ruled in my favor. Finn was ordered to repay the $50,000 he'd stolen from the joint account plus court fees. The court also slapped him with financial oversight. Every cent he earned or spent would be tracked by a third-party auditor for 2 years. Finn didn't show up to the hearing, but his lawyer's weak defense about family misunderstandings fell flat. I sat in the back, my arms crossed, feeling a grim satisfaction. Justice wasn't loud, but it was final. Back in Nashville's tight-knit community, word spread fast. Dad and Mom, Stephen and Patricia, faced a different kind of fallout. Mark and Ellen, the family friends at the dinner, stopped inviting them to their annual cookouts. Their real estate clients, once loyal, started pulling deals. Whispers of their role in Finn's fraud had reached the local Chamber of Commerce. A colleague of Dad's who'd partnered on a condo project called me to confirm the rumors. "Is it true they let Finn forge your signature?" he asked. I told him the truth, and by the next week he'd cut ties with their business. The community that once praised their family values now saw them differently. I didn't care to hear their excuses. My phone buzzed with texts from Mom: "Tanya, please, talk to us," and voicemails from Dad, his voice heavy with guilt. I ignored them all, letting the silence speak for me. Finn sent one message, a half-hearted apology that reeked of self-pity, but I deleted it without replying. Cutting them off wasn't easy. Years of hoping for a real family made my chest ache, but I was done being their doormat. I changed my number, blocked their emails, and moved on. Work became my anchor. I'd been collaborating with Richard Evans, a sharp investment banker at my firm, on a high-stakes deal for a Nashville tech company. Richard's knack for crunching numbers matched my own, and we spent late nights at the office poring over spreadsheets and pitching strategies to clients. "You're relentless," he said one evening, handing me a coffee as we finalized a proposal. I smiled, grateful for the distraction. The deal closed successfully, earning us a bonus and a nod from the board. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was building something for myself, not fixing someone else's mess. Then there was Derek Carter, a marketing consultant I met at a networking event downtown. He was charming with a quick wit and a habit of quoting bad rom-coms to make me laugh. We grabbed coffee at a Green Hills cafe where he told me about his latest campaign for a local brewery. "You ever think about slowing down?" he asked, his eyes steady on mine. I shrugged, dodging the question, but his warmth stuck with me. Our coffee dates turned into dinners, then a late-night walk along the Cumberland River where he held my hand and didn't push when I stayed quiet about my family. Derek was different, patient, grounded, nothing like Finn's reckless bravado. I leaned into this new chapter, focusing on what I could control. Richard and I started pitching bigger clients, aiming for a national account that could redefine our careers. Derek invited me to a music festival where we danced under string lights, the Nashville skyline glowing in the distance. I wasn't naive enough to think life would be perfect now, but the weight of betrayal was lighter. Finn's debt was his problem, not mine. Dad and Mom's reputation was their burden. I'd spent years trying to earn their approval, but now I was choosing myself, my work. My future, maybe even Derek. A month later, Finn emailed me from a new account. The subject line read, "You ruined everything." His words dripped with venom, blaming me for his startup's collapse and his ruined life. He claimed I'd sabotaged his dreams by exposing his fraud, even threatened to make things right if I didn't back off. My stomach churned, but I wasn't scared, I was furious. I forwarded the email to Aunt Rose, who didn't miss a beat. "This is harassment," she said over the phone, her voice sharp. "We're getting a restraining order." The next day, we filed for the order at the Nashville courthouse. Aunt Rose's lawyer friend presented Finn's email along with the civil suit records and evidence of his forgery. The judge didn't hesitate, granting a restraining order that barred Finn from contacting me or coming within 500 feet. I left the courthouse feeling lighter, like I'd reclaimed another piece of my life. But Finn, true to form, couldn't let it go. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my office downtown, banging on the glass door, shouting my name. My coworker Richard called security, who alerted the police. They arrested Finn on the spot for violating the order. The court fined him $2,000 and sentenced him to 6 months of probation, his every move watched by a court-appointed monitor. He'd dug his own grave deeper. Meanwhile, Dad and Mom's world kept crumbling. Their real estate business, once a Nashville staple, lost its last major client, a developer who'd heard about their role in Finn's scheme. Social invitations dried up. Even their church group stopped calling. I didn't revel in their downfall, but I didn't pity them either. They'd chosen Finn's lies over me, and the community they'd built their reputation on had turned its back. I hadn't spoken to them since the dinner, and their unanswered messages piled up in my old inbox, a reminder of the distance I needed. I poured my energy into something bigger. With part of my recent bonus, I launched a small nonprofit to help victims of financial abuse. I named it Second Chance, a nod to the fresh start I'd fought for. Working with a local charity organizer, I set up workshops to teach people how to spot fraud and protect their assets. Leslie volunteered her accounting skills, crunching numbers for the fund, while Derek designed a sleek website to spread the word. The first event, held at a Nashville community center, drew a dozen attendees, people like me, betrayed by those they trusted. Seeing their relief as we shared resources felt like healing a wound I didn't know I had. At work, things were looking up. Richard and I landed a national account with a tech firm, a deal that put our names on the radar. The board called me in one afternoon, offering a promotion to senior partner, a role I'd eyed for years. I accepted, my voice steady but my heart racing. The extra responsibility meant longer hours, but it also meant I was calling the shots, building a legacy on my terms. Richard toasted me with cheap office coffee, joking that I'd be running the company soon. I laughed, but the thought didn't seem so far-fetched anymore. Derek and I grew closer too. He took me to a quiet diner on the outskirts of Nashville where we talked about everything but my family, his latest campaign, my nonprofit, our shared love for bad reality TV. One night, as we walked through Centennial Park, he stopped under a street lamp and kissed me, soft and sure. It wasn't a fairy tale, but it was real, and that was enough. Derek didn't try to fix me or fill the gaps my family left. He just showed up steady and kind. Looking back, I realized family isn't about blood. It's about who stands by you when the world feels heavy. Leslie, Aunt Rose, Derek. They were my people, not the ones who'd betrayed me. Finn would carry his consequences from the fines to the probation, and my parents would live with their tarnished name. I'd spent years chasing their approval, but I didn't need it anymore. I'd built my own life one step at a time, and it was stronger than anything they could have given me. Thank you for listening to my story. It's not easy to set boundaries with family, but it's worth it to protect your peace. If you've ever had to draw that line, share your experience in the comments. I'd love to hear how you found your strength. Your stories matter, and they might just help someone else take their first step.